Pokémon, a strange new addiction of mine that has captured the hearts and minds of many people since 1998. I have seen some Pokémon things here and there. My best friend from elementary school had Pokémon Silver on the Game Boy Color. At my cousin's house, I remember watching one of the Pokémon movies with Entei and the Unknown, and I've watched some of the anime here and there. I knew about Pokémon, but I had never played the games. John introduced me to the YouTube channel Terminal Montage, and I caught myself watching his Pokémon Battle Royale videos over and over again. I eventually checked out the YouTube channel Loxton and Noggin from the links on the Battle Royale videos, and I eventually got obsessed with watching Loxton explain Pokémon. From this, I decided to finally try my first Pokémon game, that being Pokémon Violet. Pokémon Scarlet and Violet are the first fully 3D titles in the main series, and they are a huge pile of stinky poopy. The game started development in late 2019, around the same time that Pokémon Sword and Shield released. The games were announced in February 2022, and several trailers were scattered throughout the following months. At the end of September, we got an original song for the games created by Ed Sheeran titled Celestial, and it is a fucking bop. The Pokemon Company collaborated with Sheeran for the song, and it could be the only good thing about the games. A couple weeks before the games' launch, Nintendo revealed a special edition Nintendo Switch OLED model that was themed for the game. Come to think of it, I did buy an OLED model Switch for this game specifically, and you would think that I would have bought the special edition, but nope. The games were released on November 18th, 2022, and players got their hands on them and said, "This is a huge pile of dog shit!" In December of 2022, Nintendo publicly apologized for the problems that players faced with the games, and for the next 6 months we kept getting updates to the game to try to squash as many bugs as possible. The games were praised for their story and the open world region that players got to explore. The games were heavily criticized for their performance and graphics. Despite the criticism, the games are crazy successful, selling over 10 million copies in their first 3 days, being the biggest Nintendo launch ever, and over 24 million copies sold as of December 2023. Now that is very impressive. Players must have absolutely adored these games if they sold that well. Right? Now Pokemon is famous for the dual release of its mainline titles. The games are the same, with some characters changed and version-exclusive Pokemon, so if you have played Pokemon Scarlet, then you've pretty much played Pokemon Violet. This was done in the beginning of the franchise to encourage players to utilize the trading feature, which allows players to fully complete their Pokédex, but I am way too lazy to do that. I have played Pokemon Violet, so my personal experience will be on that game, but I will mention Pokemon Scarlet here and there. The games take place in the Paldea region, which is based on the Iberian Peninsula in Europe, where Spain and Portugal are located. We see our own created protagonist attend the Yuva Academy in Violet and Naranja Academy in Scarlet, where the annual treasure hunt is in full force. This school event allows students to find their own treasure on the island, which basically means this is an open world game. Go! The protagonist later helps out a serpent by feeding it their sandwich. At least it wasn't the other way around. With this act of kindness, the serpent entrusts you and allows you to take it everywhere. These serpents are the box legendaries Miraidon in Violet and Koraidon in Scarlet, which you are able to ride on throughout your adventure. The games have 3 stories for you to complete: Victory Road, Starfall Street, and Path of Legends. Victory Road is the champion challenge found in every Pokemon game. Defeat the gym leaders of each gym, defeat the Elite Four, and defeat the top champion Gita. This time, Nemona is the champion who befriends you and helps you train to become the best trainer you can be by competing against you several times in the story. Starfall Street is taking on this game's Team Rocket, which is Team Star. You help out a shy girl, Penny, stand up to some grunts, and Cassiopeia reaches out to Penny and the protagonist and asks them to join Operation Starfall, which seeks to destroy Team Star. Academy Director Clavel, who wants to figure out how Team Star began, helps them out by being disguised as a student named Clive. After defeating each squad boss, they learn that the Team Star was created to fight bullying rather than cause bullying. Penny asks the protagonist to meet her in the schoolyard at night, and this is where she reveals herself to be Cassiopeia, the creator of Team Star. Gasp! Once you kick her ass, Clavel reveals himself to them and he makes peace with Team Star, although they have to do community service for their insolence. In the Path of Legends, Arven tasks you with helping him find the 5 legendary Herba Mystica. To do this, they must defeat the Titan Pokemon who want to keep the grass all to themselves rather than passing it around the room. Later on, Arven reveals that he is seeking the herbs to heal his Mabostiff, who was injured in Area 0, which is where his parent, Turo and Violet, and Seda and Scarlet, is buried in research. Once all the Titans are off, Arven uses the herbs to heal Mabostiff and to restore Miraidon's abilities. Of course, this story ends in a battle, so after you outsmoke Arven, his parent calls him to come down to Area 0 and to bring the Violet book in Violet or the Scarlet book in Scarlet. Arven suggests that you go and get allies to prepare for this escapade. Once you get Nemona and Penny to come alongside you, Arven allows us to travel with him to the Great Crater of Paldea to reach the Zero Lab. Inside the crater, they encounter Paradox Pokemon, which are either Pokemon from the far future in Violet, or Pokemon from the ancient past in Scarlet. Finally reaching the lab, they discover that the professor is just an AI substitute for the real professor who got buried in their work some time ago. See what I did there? The AI reveals that the professor created a time machine to retrieve the Paradox Pokemon, and they task the AI to protect the time machine at all costs. The AI pulls some kind of sci-fi trope and tells the protagonist that they need to destroy the time machine in order to preserve Paldea. This leads to a battle against the AI, and once the AI is defeated, the time machine's security protocol disabled all Pokeballs in the vicinity, which means that Miraidon is the only option to defeat the AI, who also happens to have a Miraidon. Gasp! Once you defeat the opposing Miraidon, the time machine begins to go haywire, and the AI travels to the alternate time to finish the destruction. But the AI apologizes on the professor's behalf to Arven for being a bad parent before leaving. Once the escapade is over, Nemona, Clavel, and Gita organize a tournament to celebrate the end of the story. Holy shit, dude. My brain is fried from all that weed that I was smoking earlier in this story. Oh, fuck. This game has DLC. The Hidden Treasure of Area 0 is the 2-part DLC for Pokémon Scarlet and Violet that added 2 new stories and 230 more Pokemon to catch. Jesus. The first part, the Teal Mask, released on September 13th, 2023, and the Indigo Disc released on December 14th, 2023. In the Teal Mask, the protagonist gets to go on a school trip to the island of Kitakami. There, the island is having a festival, but the real mystery is finding out why the local legendary Pokemon is so bad. Because it's grass type? Turns out that the locals are just misunderstood by the events that occurred years ago, and that Ogerpon is a guardian of the island rather than an enemy. In the Indigo Disc, the protagonist gets to go to Blueberry Academy as an exchange student, and this is literally another traditional Pokemon game inside a Pokemon game, which is pretty cool. Once you complete it, then you go back to Yuva Academy, and Gita tells you about the Indigo Disc. Apparently, this disc can gain access to the deepest part of Area 0, which you are tasked with going back down there and seeing what you can find. You eventually find Terrapagos, the legendary Terra-type Pokemon, which basically means it can be any type at once while Terrastallized. But it is such a cute little turtle. My fiance would love this if she actually played Pokemon. Well, that DLC was fun. It was sure a blast pressing the A button a bunch. The gameplay of Pokemon is so simple, but it is so satisfying to go and catch them all. Going around the open world and finding the Pokemon roaming around is so cool. Throwing a Pokeball to enter into a battle, catching the Pokemon, reading about the Pokemon you just caught, filling out the Pokedex. This is the core of Pokemon, and it is still so much fun after 25 years. The rest of this game blows. Alright, the biggest problem with these games are how awful the performance of the games are, but with seeing how poorly Princess Peach Showtime runs on the Switch, I do not feel as bad for Game Freak. The game lags just about everywhere for me. Look at the people walking around, what the hell is that? The terrain just looks like blocks. It doesn't even look natural most of the time. The games would crash often for a lot of people, which led to people returning them and swearing off this kids franchise forever. Luckily, the game never crashed for me, but it did freeze on me a few times. These games definitely could have used a couple more years in the oven, but I am pretty sure that the Pokemon Company wanted these games out in 2021, so Game Freak had a lot of pressure to get these games out there. These games are the first fully open-world Pokemon titles. The games bring over 100 new Pokemon to the table, along with nearly 300 returning Pokemon. The games allow you to ride, climb, and fly Miraidon all over the place. Game Freak had developed this all in the matter of 3 years' time. That is insane. These games started development right after Pokemon Sword and Shield's release, and those two games also had a 2-part DLC that came later. And plus, 2020 was a very terrifying year for the world. And with the Pokemon Company wanting these games out yesterday, Game Freak had so much pressure on them. No wonder why these games perform as bad as they do. So while yes, these games are the worst of the franchise, and they deserve to get the hate they do, it's not the developers' fault. It's due to greedy businessmen wanting money to flow as fast as possible. So have some mercy on Game Freak. Whoa, I did not expect to defend a game developer today. You know, maybe my heart's growing 3 times its size. I'm getting too fat for my own good. Of course, these games are an open-world adventure. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild inspired every Nintendo franchise to go that route, apparently. Now, Pokemon Sword and Shield had the wild area that was open world, but it was just a small portion of those games. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet fully embrace it. Once you get your starter Pokemon and get through the Academy section, the world is yours to explore in any order you please. You have the areas that are full of Pokemon scattered all over the place, and the cities just blend in with the world so well. There are no distinct borders between the cities and the wild areas. This is so amazing for Pokemon. It brings back the magical feeling of discovery that Pokemon Red and Blue captured at the time of their release. The fact that with completing the Path of Legends storyline, you get upgrades to Miraidon that allow you to climb, swim, and fly, you can literally go anywhere in the game, and it is very satisfying. The 3 starter Pokemon this time around are all so adorable. You have Sprigatito, Fuecoco, and Quaxley, and I went with Fuecoco just because fire is an overpowered type. Its middle evolution, Crocolore, is pretty boring, but Skeledirge is pretty dope, plus it gains Ghost type upon its final evolution. Of course, the box legendaries are Miraidon and Koraidon, serpent-looking Pokemon that look like bicycles. Spain is well known for biking, and a lot of participants in the MotoGP racing scene hail from Spain. And hell, even MotoGP's headquarters are in Madrid, Spain, so this definitely makes sense. Miraidon's purple electric bike design is pretty neat, but the facial expressions are too robotic for its own good, but do make sense since it is a robot. The games play around with convergent evolution, which are species that resemble each other but are completely different species. For example, Toadstool and Toedscruel are mushroom Pokemon, and Tentacool and Tentacruel are jellyfish Pokemon, 2 completely different species that have evolved very similarly. I have the hardest time saying that word. There are 2 regional variants this time around as well. Paldean Tauros is a black Iberian bull, and Paldean Wooper is a muddy little guy who is ground poison type rather than water type, and it evolves into Clodsire instead of Quagsire. The Paradox Pokemon are a neat idea, but Scarlet did a way better job than Violet did in the designs department. These Pokemon are supposed to represent what the current Pokemon might have looked like in the past, and the designs in Scarlet are definitely believable. Violet's Paradox Pokemon are supposed to represent what the current Pokemon might look like in the future, and making them all robotic is super boring and unoriginal. The only one that I legitimately like is Iron Thorns, which is based on Tyranitar. Expecting these distant future Pokemon to just be robotic is pretty rough, and I hope that the future games do not have a bunch of robots running around. I had the most fun in this game discovering all the Pokemon I could find, catching them, and reading all about them. I fell in love with filling out the Pokédex. but I am still too lazy to 100% any game, so you know I definitely have not completed the Pokédex. Pokemon's gameplay is so simplistic, all you do is hit the A button a bunch. This can definitely be a turnoff for most people, but I absolutely love simplicity, so I'm intrigued. To be the best Pokemon trainer you can be, you will need to understand the type of your Pokemon, what the type is strong against and weak against, and what attacks to use when to best benefit your party. Now for me, the biggest hurdle was figuring out all of the types' strengths and weaknesses, but for someone who's been playing this for 25 years and counting, the combat is piss easy. In my opinion, the combat can still be challenging, but I do understand that a lot of people are sick with how easy the game is. But I also know that Pokemon is made for toddlers, and the average player of Pokemon is in their 30s, so it makes sense that the combat gets shit on all the time. The game's big gimmick are the terrestrial phenomenon in the region. This allows Pokemon to terrestrialize, which allows them to utilize their Terra type. It's pretty dumb. I mean, yeah, it's cool I guess, but it doesn't add too much spice to the gameplay. Certain moves get more powerful when the Pokemon is terrestrialized, and using a move that is the same as its Terra type makes it more powerful, but it's just whatever. The game has this mechanic called Let's Go, which allows your Pokemon to walk right beside you. It can get into battles and earn experience points for your Pokemon and give you items, but I never really did this personally. Plus, it just gives the game something else to crash over, so I never bothered with it whenever I was out and about in the world. The game also adds co-op play, which allows up to 4 people to play together in the same game, running around and having fun together. Me and Sunny did this one time, and it worked well enough for us, although the game did not like processing what was happening. Pokémon Scarlet and Violet are the lowest rated Pokémon titles ever, and it's no surprise as to why. The games were definitely not ready for launch, and although Nintendo released updates that fixed most of the bugs, the performance of the games are still awful. The textures and the graphics are so bad looking, and the environments are all so crudely modeled. So many players returned the games after their first experience due to how glitchy they were, and all the bugs and crashes that they experienced. One critic called the games comprehensive technical failures, and that says it all right there for the game's legacy. The games could have definitely used another year or so of development time to improve these issues. I feel like if the Pokemon Company would have just let Game Freak had more time with the games and let them start work on them after the DLC for Pokemon Sword and Shield released, these games would have been the best Pokemon games yet. The games were amazing at introducing truly open-world concepts to the series. It captured the real magic that Pokemon Red and Blue tried to establish all those years ago. Being able to go anywhere and complete the storylines in any order is definitely a strength these games have. The story is pretty simple in my opinion, but it is a good story, with some saying that it has genuinely tender moments. These games sold amazingly well, being the biggest launch in Nintendo's history, and for the ones who suffered through the technical issues, these games were incredibly fun. The Pokemon introduced this time around are stupid brilliant. The designs, the inspirations, the history and science behind them, these Pokemon are really good. Although the games did not hold up well at all due to the technical issues, the good that came from these titles are amazing, and I feel that it is only going to get better from here. My experience with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet was great, but I know that a ton of people despise these games. The games definitely deserve all of the criticism that they get for their performance, bad textures and graphics, and for all of the bugs and crashes experienced at launch. However, these games deserve praise for what they introduced to the series. Fully open world gameplay, wickedly neat Pokemon designs, and for allowing freedom with how to progress in the story. Pokemon Violet was such a fun game for me, and I am so happy that I got introduced to the series the way that I did, and that I finally bought the game, because now I am a huge Pokemon fan. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go enjoy my new strange addiction by smoking a few hand-rolled joints with my best buds in the back of the garage.